Hey, welcome to this video. Today we're going to be expanding our expenses application. This is an application that we have been building over several videos. So if you're new to the channel or this video, please be sure to check those out. So we're going to add this statistics page now. So if we click here, we're going to show a little donut with the expenses per category. So if we go click back to home, we can see the expenses again. So pretty much the donut is going to show groceries, but it's going to add these two numbers up, and it's going to show in the donut, it's going to show student loans, gas, and credit card. This is going to be dynamic, so whatever we add here is what is going to show up on the actual donut. So let's say we add one for, we don't have eating out yet. So let's do 58 here. We add it. So this is added. And if we go to statistics, we should be able to see eating out 58 as well as all of the other ones. On this video, we're going to make use of Chart.js, Redux, React, and .NET. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get started. All right, so I have open expenses.frontend, our front-end project in Visual Studio Code, and I also have open a terminal right here. Remember, you can go to terminal at the top and click on new terminal, and it would just open a terminal for you if you're using Visual Studio Code. And the first thing we're going to do is install charts. This is what chart. This is what we're going to be using to display our statistics. So let's do npm install react-chartjs-2 and let's do chart.js and hit enter. All right, now that it's finished, let's head over to components and let's open up navbar. And in here, we want to add a couple of new routes. We want to add one for our statistics and one for homepage. That way, once we navigate towards statistics and we want to go back to the homepage, we can actually go back to it. So right here, if it's logged in, we actually want to show more than just a logout now. So let's do a div and let's bring it down and wrap it up. There you go. And let's do a style. We can do display, flex, and we can do align items, center. Yeah, format this. And then we can do nav link, style. We can do margin, left. Let's give it 1. And then do variant. Link, and this one is going to point to homepage, so here's the root, and then let's call it like home. Let's close this. Perfect. Now let's add one for statistics. So nav link, let's give it same style. So I'm going to copy this actually, and I'm going to copy all this stuff. All right, and this is going to be statistics. There you go, if I can spell that correctly. Yep, okay. And let's close it here. And there you go. If you were to do now an npm start on your console, and this app should show up, and if you run your backend and you log into an account, you should be able to see now the button home and statistics. So if you click on statistics, it should bring you to your localhost column, your port /statistics. So you can see it has page not found. So we're missing some configuration on our React router, and so we're going to do that next. But if we click home, it will take you back to our homepage. Let's go ahead and create our statistics page. So under components, we can right click right here, do new file, and let's do statistics page, .js. And let's go ahead and import donut. From react-chartjs-2. There you go. And then we can do const statistics page the end, we can do export default statistics page. There you go. And in here, we can do return. Let's do a div. And inside here, we can have, actually, let's give it some style. So we can say style, and we're going to do max width. I'm going to copy this. Let's paste it here. Max width, max height. Let's do margin auto. That way it centers. And text align center. Okay, inside of div, let's do an h4. And let's give it some style as well. So we can say margin top 10 pixels. Let me auto format that. There you go. And we can say expenses per category. And right here is where we're going to show our donut. Now we will need to pass in data to it. So we're going to do data and pass in a data object. Now let's create this data object. So up here, we can do const data. And this will need to have labels. So we're going to do labels. This is going to be an array. So we can do, say, shopping, credit card. This is just going to be a test. So let's leave it like this for now. Let's do a data set or data sets. And this is going to have the actual data or the numbers. This is actually going to be an array as well. So we can have numbers, say we do here like 10, comma, and then do like 3. And then lastly, we got to do the background colors. So we can do background color. And I have some colors here that I'm just going to paste, save time. There you go. So have blue, red, yellow, green, and so on and so forth. So now we have a statistics component, and it has this data object, and it has labels. So this is going to be, well, actually it's going to show up on the donut itself. So it's going to show shopping and credit card. So how much for shopping is going to be 10. How much for credit card? It's going to be 3. And then the colors it's going to show is in order. So first it's going to show blue and then red. And then these are not going to be used unless we have more labels. So if we scroll down a little bit, we can see that we have a div. Inside the div, we have this h4, which is just a heading saying expenses per category. And then we're just going to show our donut. And that's it for now. We're going to finish hooking this up, and we're going to give it a try before we actually try to put our data in here, in labels and in data. Let's go ahead and open up our app.js. And if we scroll down, or actually before we scroll down, we can actually copy one of these references and do a quick import of statistics page. There you go. So we import this right at the bat. And if we scroll down, and right here, we can add a new route. So we can do route path, and we can do statistics, and we can do a render, just like we have above, pretty much. And if it's logged in, we want to render our new page. So statistics page. Else, we just want to go to sign in page. Previously, when we checked our browser, we had page not found, and that's because we didn't have this route added yet. But now, since we have /statistics, whenever we go to that page, we should be able to render our component. So pretty cool. Let's save this and let's check our browser. Okay, so I'm at the browser. Let's click on stats and we can see shopping and credit card. And if we go to shopping, we can see is value number 10 and credit card is value number 3. Cool little thing is if we click on this thing, we get this for free pretty much. So that's pretty awesome. Now that we have this donut set up and the page set up and it's working, the routing, we can go back to home and go back to statistics. Then I think it's a good point for us to actually have real data here. So we already know how this works. We already know how the donut wants the data, so on and so forth. So let's actually go and get the actual data that we need. Essentially getting all the labels and all of the data itself, of the amount, is going to be calculated by the backend. So we're going to make an endpoint. We're going to call that endpoint. That endpoint is going to return a list of just unique values or descriptions or categories, whatever you want to call it, and its corresponding amounts. So say there is 3 shopping, each one has $5 on it, then that's going to be the backend is going to return shopping and it's going to return the number 15 along with it. So that's going to be the backend's responsibility to do. In the front end, we need to make sure we call that endpoint. Once we retrieve that data from the backend, we're going to store it in our state and then eventually display it on the stats page. But let's take it a step at a time. So let's start off by creating that service that is going to make that call to our endpoint or our backend. So let's right click on services and do new file. And let's call this statistics.js. Okay, in here we have to import Axios. And this should be familiar because we're going to follow the same pattern that we are using for our other services. So let's do const Axios instance equal to Axios.create. And let's specify the base URL. So we're going to do process.env that react app base URL. And then we can do /statistics. Again, this is the same that we have been using for our expenses. So essentially we're just setting up the base URL so we don't have to set it on every request. This is going to be whatever is right here on our environment. So if we go to .env, we're going to see that our base app, React app base URL is this. So this is pointing to our backend right now. And then we're going to do /statistics. So this is going to be the base URL for this statistics service. And over here, let's do Axios instance that interceptors that request that use config let's do config that headers authorization. Let's do bearer space plus session storage that get item token. And let's return that config. Again, we have done this in the past. This is just going to pretty much append our token to our request. This way we can actually hit that endpoint. If we don't have a token, we won't be able to access this stuff that we need. All right, so now let's get to the actual method that is going to make a call. So we can do export const get expenses per category. It's going to be asynchronous. And then we're going to pass in a dispatch. That's the pattern we have been using. And in here, we're going to do a try and catch. Get an error and just log that error. So we can do console.log error. Now the endpoint that we're going to be creating is going to be an HTTP GET. So we can do const data equal to await Axios instance that get. So this is going to make a call to our endpoint, our backend, with the base URL /statistics to the HTTP GET method, and it's going to retrieve the data. And this is actually the data that we need to put in the donut. So pretty cool. We have the data. Now we need a way to store it in our state. So put it in our state. And the way to do that we've been doing that is through a dispatch in action. So we haven't created this action yet, but we can just name it here. So we can say set expense amount per category, and we're going to pass in data. That's it. We're dispatching that action, and the payload is going to be the data. So stuff that is returned from the endpoint. So, and actually since we already did this and we're about to create this, let's pretend that we have that already and let's import it. So we can do set expense amount per category. It's going to be an action from app/statistics slice. There you go. That's part of the slice. So I guess you know it. Let's go and create that right now. So let's scroll up the left menu here. And I believe under app, we have our slices. So we can right click on app, do new file, and let's do statistics slice.js. Now this slice is going to import create slice from at redux.js/toolkit. We're going to do export const statistics slice equal to create slice. We're going to name this slice. So this is going to be statistics. Let's give it an initial state. So initial state is going to be, is only going to have for now expense amount per category, which is the only thing we have here. And it's going to be an empty array. And then for reducers, let's do set expense amount per category. Let's pass in state, let's pass in action. And inside here, all we gotta do is return. So we're gonna leave the state as is. And we're going to add this expense amount per category. Get that payload. There you go. So everything else in the state stays the same, but we add in that expense amount per category. And then lastly, let's not forget to export const set expense amount per category from the statistics slice that actions. And let's export default statistics slice that reducer. Since we imported this before we created this, let me make sure I have the names right. So I'm going to copy this and just make sure that, there you go. So we're importing this action and we're dispatching that action, passing in data. Cool. All right, we have this. Let's save this. And now let's head over to our store and let's finish hooking this up. So I'm going to copy one of these, or maybe I shouldn't because it's not that much. So import statistics slice. Oh, there you go. Autocomplete for me. That's great. Take it in a day. And then all we got to do here is on the bottom, we're going to do statistics slice statistics slice. All right. Now this is hooked up for us. So as of right now, we are able to make a call to the endpoint we're about to create. Then that response, we are dispatching an action, passing in the data of the response, and we are storing it in the state. We haven't hooked up anything else yet, so we'll have to go to the statistics page and actually pull that data from the state and display it in our donut. But I say we go to our backend and actually implement that endpoint first. Okay, so I have opened our expenses.web API application on Visual Studio, and we're about to create our new endpoint. And this endpoint should live in a new controller. So if we right click on controllers and we go to add new class, we can call this one statistics controller. And on top of the class, we should have authorize. This way we make sure that the user has already logged in. And we can do API controller. Make sure we import this. Let me get rid of this so you can see clearly that we are importing ASP.NET Core authorization and ASP.NET Core MVC. And lastly, let's specify the route. And this is the default we have been using pretty much. So essentially what this notation means is we drop the controller part and the route is going to be statistics. So whatever port number / statistics / and then any other name that we may put for any of the specific endpoints, you can also put the route for those. But in our case, since we're only going to have a get, HTTP get, the route is going to be whatever port number / statistics. All right, let's create our endpoint. So we're going to do HTTP get, and this is going to be returning an action result. And let's call it get expense amount per category. Okay, this is going to return on OK, and we're going to have to make a call to our servers here and call a method. So let's go ahead and create our service that is going to take care of this logic. So we're going to create two files. So if we go to core, this is where our logic is. Yeah, this is where our logic is. So let's right click here on expenses.core and go to add. Let's go to class. And let's call this statistics services. I want to copy this for whenever we create an interface. Let's make this public before I forget. And let's right click on expenses.core again. And let's create a class. This time I'm going to put interface, and I'm going to call it iStatistics services. That's it. Let's make sure this is public. I'm going to get rid of this stuff. And the only method we're going to have is going to return IEnumerable. This way we can iterate through all these values. So this is going to have a key value pair. Let's start. So make sure we're using generics. And this is going to be string, comma, a double. So this could be, for example, credit card, $25. And that's IEnumerable because it's going to be pretty much some kind of array list of that. Now for the name, we can call it like get expense amount per category. think that's good enough. So let's save this file. And right here, we're going to do statistics services. Pretty good. And let's hit on implement interface. Now we need to implement this method. And to do that, we need to get the context. So we can do private read only. And we've done this for the expenses. This is going to be db.app db context. And then let's create a read only db.user. Okay, so in here, let's create a constructor. So we can do public statistics services. And this is going to get our db.app db context. And it's also going to get an HTTP context accessor. Let's make sure we're using that. So using Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.HTTP. Cool. So we're injecting these two things. So this is pretty much the same if we go to our expenses services. So we need to get the context. So we're going to do context equal to context. And then we're going to pull the user just to know who is the user. So context that users. And then we're going to get the first one. Make sure we are using system.link. So we can do u.username equal to HTTP context accessor .HTTP context .user .identity .name. And we do this because we put the username inside our JWT, and we're basically comparing the username that we have on the database with the username that we have on that token. If that matches, we essentially set that user. So we now know who are we talking about. Okay, now that we have that, we are ready to implement this method. So this is going to return directly. So we can use the context, and then we're going to do expenses. Then we're going to do where there you go, where e.user.id matches the user. That means we're only looking at expenses that the user owns, or this specific user's expenses. And we're going to do a group by. But before we can do a group by, we need to do as enumerable. Not we will get an exception. And this is because some of the reasons that we're not going to cover in this video, but yes, so we got to do something like as enumerable, and then we're going to do group by description. And we're going to go to dictionary, and then we're going to pull out the key, e.key, and we're going to do e.sum of x that amount. Pretty much we're setting, in this dictionary, we're setting the key. So the key is going to be the description, and then we're summing all the amounts. So like the example I gave before, say the user has 3 credit card expenses, and each is of $5. So in here, we'll create a key and then have all those transactions, credit card. And in here, we're going to create a dictionary, which has the key as, say, credit card and the sum of that. So here's where we actually compute it and put it together as 15. Finally, let's do a select and do a new key value pair string double And we're gonna do x.key, comma, x.value. So at the end, we're just gonna have some kind of list that has each key value pair. So it has string, which is, could be, for example, credit card and $15. And the next key could be something like groceries and $20. And the next key could be like gas and $10. So that's the idea. And as you can see with LINQ, it's pretty concise to do all this logic. If you don't feel too familiar or comfortable with LINQ and you want to go with another approach, please be sure to do so as well. Be sure to save this file, and now let's head over back to our controller and let's make use of this. So up here, we'll need to inject our service. So let's do a private read-only iStatistics services. Let's make sure we're using that. So using expenses.core. And now let's create a constructor so we can inject that. So we can do public statistics controller, iStatistics controller. iStatistics services. And then here we could do statistics services equal to statistics services. All right, so we injected this here. So that's good. And all we got to do now is do statistics services that get expense amount per category, call that method, and that's pretty much it. And before we try to run this, we got to make sure we go to startup and make sure that this is ready and configure before we can use it. So you see we have other transient here for expensive services and for user service. So let's make sure we add transient for our statistics services. So this pretty much creates an instance every time one is needed. And that's it. We have hooked up everything and our logic is ready. So let's make sure we run this and let's head back to our front-end code. And we're getting errors saying the name OK does not exist in the current context. And I think it's because we forgot here to extend from controller base. And that's pretty much it. So save that and make sure to run it. So our backend is working. So the easiest way to actually test that it's doing the right thing is to finish it, hooking it up here in the front end so we can make the call. That way we can pass the token and all that kind of stuff. So let's go over to the statistics page. And like I said before, make sure your backend is running. Let's go to the statistics page and let's create here a dispatch equal to use dispatch. So we need to import the use dispatch from React Redux. And also while we at it, let's import selector. As well as let's import the get expenses per category from services statistics. And lastly, let's make sure we import the use effect and the use state from React. Okay, so we have this. Let's make sure we are pulling whatever we have on the state for expenses amount category per category. So let's do cons expense amount per category. And then we're going to use the use selector for that. So we pass in the state, and from the state, we can pull the slice. We can actually bring this down. So we can pull this, we can go inside this statistics, not page, statistics, slice, there you go, dot expense amount per category. Here you go. So we're trying to get whatever data we have in the state and storing the variable right here. Let's also create some kind of object that will have our labels and essentially the data. So let's create something like that to be a little more organized. So we can have, say, donut, set donut. Oh, I thought I had to end. There you go. Set donut. Use state. And then this is going to have the labels, which is just an array, and it's going to have the data. So pretty much donut has the labels and it has the data, this data. For those of you not too familiar with React, remember the use state, how it works is this is the variable, this references whatever is inside here, right? This is the initial state. So whatever you put here is, well, essentially the initial state. And the set donut, this is the function that sets this variable. So we can say set donut, parentheses, we pass in some kind of object, and that's what donut is going to have as a value. And you'll see in a second how that works. But we're also going to use a use effect. And then here we're going to call our get expenses per category function, and we're going to pass dispatch. Remember, expenses use effect hook takes two arguments. The first one is a function, so we can do whatever we want with the function. In this case, we're just calling the get expenses per category, which lives in our services statistics. So this is going to call our endpoint, the endpoint we just created. We're going to pass the dispatch. That way it can dispatch the action it needs and set the state correctly. And then the second one is the dependencies. So this is going to run depending on what we have here. Since I just put an empty array, this is just going to run once, only at the beginning. So at the beginning, we're going to make a call and pull the data, set it in the state, and that's it. Once it's on the state, we're actually going to get the value here on expense amount per category. This value is going to get that state. Or I mean, the value from the state. So we're actually going to do another use effect. And this use effect is going to run this function. This function is going to run every time this changes. So I'm going to put this in here. So every time this changes, we're going to run this. And the reason for that is that we got to set the correct labels and data. So we're going to do inside here, set donut. Remember, we're going to call this as a function, like if it was a function. We're going to pass in an object to it. So we're going to pass in labels. And then labels is going to be equal to expenses, amount per category, that map. And then we're only going to grab the keys from there because that's how the donut wants it. So we only have the keys, meaning the description, the category, whatever you want to call it. And the other thing we got to pass is the data, which is the actual values, the actual numbers. And this is going to be expense, amounts per category, that map. And then this is going to be x that value. And that's it for this part. So all we got to do now is, since we have all this stuff set up, you can see this is not being used at the moment. So we should use it. So we can replace this with donut. Did I miss an H here? Yeah, I did miss an H. So I'm gonna put the H there. Donut, that labels. And we're gonna replace this with donut, that data. Okay, and oh, actually key is capital. Let's make sure we do that. Key is capital and value is capital. And one more thing I want to do, if you scroll down here to that div, we can say this is hidden. Pretty much if we don't have an expense amount per category, or if the array is just empty. So to say that, we can just do expense amount per category, that length. And that's pretty much it. So let's save this and let's head to a browser, see if this is working correctly. Okay, so I'm at the browser now, and as you can see, I have a few expenses logged. So I have groceries twice, student loans once, gas and credit card twice. And if we look at our state, we can see that statistics slice has expense amount per category and is currently empty. There's nothing there. So now let's hit on the statistics, and we can see the graph populated. So that's pretty cool. We have groceries, student loans, gas, credit card, and it seems like it added them correctly from what I can see. And if we go ahead and go to Redux again and go to state and go to statistics slice, we can see that we have the values here from our call to that endpoint. We dispatch that action and we set these values. So right here, we can see it as well. Under actions, we can see the payload that we passed. So we passed some keys and some value. So pretty cool. And with this, we have reached the end of this video. Remember, practice makes perfect. So make sure to practice. Just watching me is not going to be enough to stick this kind of stuff in your head. You actually had to like figure out things on your own. So be sure to have enough practice and, you know, be curious and try to add stuff on your own and try new things, because that's the way to learn the most efficient way. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you all on the next one.